For over half a century, this is what U.S. Army recruits faced on day one of boot camp.
Are you having a problem listening to the directions that I...
But no more, because this is what day one looks like now. They're even clapping. This is the infamous shark attack, where drill sergeants go out of their way to break 18-year-old Army recruits who just left the comfort of their homes a few hours earlier. Imagine 3 drill sergeants screaming in your face, one ordering you to get down, the other telling you to get up, while the third one asks you philosophical questions. But just like many celebrities, the shark attack got cancelled. It's been almost 2 years since the Army's 2020 announcement, which changed the way infantry recruits were greeted at basic training. Apparently, the yelling is now too aggressive on trainees, but it doesn't stop there. U.S. Army's 2021 guidelines on appearance standards authorizes additional colors of lipstick and nail polish for females and wearing clear nail polish by male soldiers. They even removed and replaced words like mohawk, dreadlock, and faddish, calling them potentially offensive and weaponized. As you can imagine, many have voiced concerns over U.S. Army's recent decisions, criticizing the Army for accommodating snowflakes and giving in to the woke culture. Even though you may not believe it, this is a pivotal point in the history of the U.S. Army, who's fighting a war in the United States. Because failure to win this war, which concerns millennials and phone zombies of Gen Z, could mean the demise of the U.S. Army. But it's not what you think. On October 29, 1940, a nationwide lottery was held across the United States. The winners would become the first people in American history to be drafted into military service during peacetime. Drawing numbers from the same fishbowl used in World War I's 1917 draft, President Roosevelt announced the first number.
Is serial number 158.
Fast forward 33 years to June 30th, 1973, marking the day the last person was drafted into the U.S. Army. Since then, military service has been voluntary in the United States. But in 2020, the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command called for all training centers to discontinue the shark attacks. Shark attack was a non-documented period of instruction developed during the draft Army years, when soldiers had to serve non-voluntarily. All the yelling and harsh behavior was meant to establish dominance and authority using intimidation and fear to weed out the weak. Those who stand behind this change argue that the practice not only did not instill the spirit of infantry in recruits, it in fact betrayed the trust between teammates and with the leaders. So shark attacks were replaced with the first 100 yards. The first 100 yards has 120 steps, according to Google. But according to the U.S. Army, it has 5 phases. Phase 1 starts with a number of questions and answers to prepare the recruits and help them gain appreciation for the Army. Phase 2 is a resupply exercise, where each platoon works as a member of a team to accomplish a mission. Phase 3 is made up of ACFT events, like push-ups and leg tugs, and platoons that don't perform to the standard will be given corrective training exercises. Then they're quizzed on the questions from Phase 1. Phase 4 is made up of company and platoon introductions and infantry demonstration squad. The demonstration squad is meant to inspire the trainees to stay the course and complete the last 100 yards of training. And finally, Phase 5 moves the platoons into their respective bays to start their red cycle training. Keep in mind that this is all happening on day 1, and it's simply replacing the shark attack, which was also on day 1. Army basic training is about 10 weeks long. According to the U.S. Army, those 10 weeks have not changed. They're as tough as they've always been, but it does seem like they're trying quite hard to make day 1 more appealing to recruits. And the reason is 100% justified, because the U.S. Army is in crisis, a recruiting crisis. Fiscal year 2022 was U.S. Army's most challenging recruiting year since the start of the all-volunteer force in 1973. But what's even more concerning are the reasons behind this failure. First off, the overwhelming majority of young adults in America are not eligible to join the Army. A study published by the Pentagon in 2022 shows that 77% of youth between the ages of 16 and 24 are not fully qualified for military service. That's 3 out of every 4 young adults simply not making the cut. And it's been getting worse, because just 8 years ago, in 2014, 71% were ineligible, not 77%. You can probably guess the number one disqualifier, but there are actually quite a few that follow. Being overweight is by far the biggest reason for disqualification of candidates. The obesity epidemic among young adults in America has become a major problem over the past decades. But even for those who pass the weight test, there are more barriers ahead. Medical history can be a roadblock, even if you don't have a medical condition anymore. Bad credit scores can also prevent you from joining the military, because if you already have too much debt or are under financial distress, that can take your focus away from your mission. Drug use and criminal records make you unfit for obvious reasons, and even tattoos, if they're on the neck or face, could be a problem. Other certain permanent body modifications fall under the same category. Now, the Army does issue waivers to some candidates who are mostly qualified but say are a bit overweight or have had minor criminal records, allowing them to be recruited. If there is a will, there is a waiver. But accepting recruits with poor qualifications can be tricky, as highlighted by a case from 2006 in which an Iraqi girl was raped and her family killed by American soldiers, one of whom required waivers for minor criminal activity and poor educational background to join the army. But just because 1 out of 4 American youth is eligible to join the military, it doesn't necessarily mean they will. The inclination among the population to join the military and serve the country, aka propensity to serve, is at an all-time low. This year, for the first time, 52% of the youth say they have never even considered the military as an option. Only 9% of the young men and women say that they are interested in joining the military. As you can see, the pool from which the Army can actually recruit from is drastically smaller than the population of American youth. But the challenge of recruiting is far from over. The Army now has to compete in a tight labor market, not only against private companies, some of which offer more alluring benefits, but also against other government agencies that are targeting that same demographic. For example, law enforcement, fire departments, and the FBI. The US Army is not in a war to fight against Mimi millennials and phone zombies of Gen Z. They are fighting for them. This is a war for talent. Despite reducing its recruiting goals, the US Army fell short of more than 15,000 soldiers this year and is projecting a gap of at least 21,000 active duty troops in 2023. Even though the recruiting crisis has hit the US Army the hardest, the Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps are also struggling to fill their quota. But the shortage of qualified individuals to join the military is not limited to the United States. Take the British Army, for example. They had been so short on candidates for a few years that they resorted to some interesting posters and TV ads. As part of the recruiting campaign known as This Is Belonging, the British Army launched a series of outdoor posters targeting snowflakes, gamers, and selfie addicts, calling for people with the compassion of snowflakes, stamina of gamers, and the confidence of selfie addicts to join the army. The controversy around these posters got the attention of the press and the people, who ultimately helped the TV ads and the campaign to achieve their ultimate objective, driving up recruitment numbers, and at a lower cost than in previous years. But just having nice TV ads is not going to solve the problem in the long run. There are two primary areas that should be focused on. First, increasing the size of the pool of candidates, of course without lowering the hiring standards. An increasing percentage of those who serve in uniform have a close relative who has also served. In other words, people who are more familiar with the military are more likely to enlist. But just hiring more aggressively from military families, which are an ever-decreasing percentage of the population, would not work in the long run. Simply increasing the advertising budget to amplify existing narratives is also unlikely to yield results. You can't always rely on yesterday's solutions to solve tomorrow's problems. The armed forces need new narratives and new ways of communicating those narratives to young adults and their families. The army replacing Shark Attack with the first 100 yards is a good example of this. But not all focus should be on new recruits, which brings us to the second point: retention. The military has to do a better job with retaining existing service members who are already living the military lifestyle. Persuading service members and their families to remain in service can ease the pressure of having to hire new recruits. Improvements in family housing and childcare facilities and offering bonuses can help with retaining service members. But it's not all about money. Just like any other workforce, those in the military are also looking for career growth. Many leave service due to a perceived lack of career opportunities in their field. But they might be overlooking the variety of opportunities that exist across other branches. There needs to be more joint efforts among all branches of the military to encourage service members to remain in uniform, regardless of the color of that uniform. The bottom line is that doubling down on existing approaches in hopes of achieving a different outcome is doomed to fail. This is why the military must reevaluate and adjust its ways. Their message must resonate with current and future young Americans and their families. As demographics and their attitude evolve, the military has no choice but to... I'll let Brad Pitt say the last words.
You're discounting what scouts have done for 150 years, even yourself?
Adapt or die.